What's up, everybody? I'm Abatage, and welcome to the HLTB podcast, Fantasy Critic League edition, hosted by me. It's all me now. I'm in control. I've taken over. I have 3 guests today, and we're going to go around the horn and just introduce ourselves. Let's start with Alex. Who are you, and who's your publisher?
Oh, hey, it's me. So I'm with Funky Face Studios, killer publisher.
Very nice.
Should I talk about the game that I like right now, too?
Yes, please do. Tell me about your best game you drafted this year.
Yeah, I think my best game for sure was Chicory, A Colorful Tale. That's one that I found in the Steam game sales. Not only was it an incredible game, but it ended up scoring really well. And I think it just slid under everybody's radar. And I was like, got it.
Yeah, that brought in a nice 17 points for you, which was pretty epic. Double figures is good, but getting closer to that 20 score is kind of makes all the difference.
Especially this year.
So Funky Face Studios there with Alex. Let's move on to our next contender, Paula. What is your publisher and what was your favorite game you've drafted this year?
Paula here. My publisher was named Pokey and Paula Studios, or just Pokey and Paula, really. And I kind of had 2 favorite picks this year. One of them it was Basta Fellows because I was so happy. Otome gave me so many fucking points, and the second one is Shin Megami Tensei 5. I am so happy. The wait was so worth it. I also got a high score, so at the very least, it brought me in the top part of the ranking here.
Absolutely, and both those games scored 19 and 16 respectively, which again, very well received games. So excellent picks there from Pokey and Paw. And finally, good old Rick with CD Projekt. Rick.
Like the namesake, we overpromised and grossly underdelivered. More specifically, 3 of my games didn't release. 4 if you count one that I swapped out, and then a 5th needed manually scoring. But that manual score is probably my favorite game that I picked last year. That is the Hironobu Sakaguchi backed Fantasian, a pick that not many people really thought about because it was an Apple Arcade game, but one that was my best scoring game. One that definitely flew under the radar, a little bit like Chicory, out of left field, which I kind of like. But yeah, it's not been the year that any of us wanted. Well, it's not been the year that I wanted, let's say. But I'm sure we'll get into that as we go. Yeah, well, touche.
So, yes, dear listeners, we are talking about the Fantasy Critic League, which, if you haven't heard about it, it is basically a fantasy football league, but for video games. And you can find lots of info about it on the HLTB forum and the Discord. So this episode is going to be all about it, and we're going to talk about the year and some strategies and the picks and see what these guys have learned and not learned and succeeded with and that sort of thing as we go. So yeah, that's what you can look forward to in this episode. And we're going to kick off with Paula, who was last year's champion in 2021. She took out the entire year very handily. And so, Paula, how has this year, do you reckon, been different to last year being 2020? Sorry, this year being 2021. Because last year we had a bit of a hiccup with the whole pandemic scenario and a lot of games being delayed and that sort of thing. But yeah, how do you, having succeeded last year and played this year as well, how do you feel it's changed or been the same even?
First of all, this year there wasn't that one game that pretty much took over everything else, because last year Animal Crossing New Horizons was the game that put me in first place and kept me there for a while. And that game not only scored really well, but it took over the world by storm because it was pretty much what people needed back then. And even though if many games were delayed, both last year and this year, I feel like this year has been a bit, I don't want to say lackluster, but there hasn't been any big hits last year. So on one hand, there was some fierce competition, but on the other hand, Alex, who got those very big hits, or like bigger hits, I want to say, pretty much didn't have much competition because like there wasn't like any way anyone would ever like be able to score anything close to him.
Yeah, well, and like we were saying in the intro, like you guys, your big numbers were like 16, 19, that kind of thing. Whereas just looking at last year's league, Paula, you had 2 which were 20 and 21, which was Animal Crossing and Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which just shows they were bigger, they were better received critically anyway than anything this year, really.
Yeah, like I don't even have the best scoring games on the list. Like the best one's like a 92. Yeah, no, I have the best scoring was like Forza. I just have workhorses. That I feel like this year was the year of the workhorse game, where it's like it is a great game, but it's not like genre defining games, which is kind of like what we got the year before.
Well, and I think consistency throughout the roster was a bit more important this year as well. Like we had a lot of people who earned a lot of points, but then had games which got them negative or zeros and that kind of thing in there as well.
Yeah. Also, like I picked up Stray like as soon as they said like, "Hey, this game is gonna like release this year," and like 2 weeks later, it was like, "Oh, hey guys, we're sorry, but the game is delayed." And I remember having, I think I had like 1 or 2 other games that had the same happening. So I feel like this year is seeing more of the impact of a pandemic than last year in a way. Because last year the games that came out like were pretty much ready to go for that year. Well, this year the games that could have been ready to go like between the end of last year and this year kind of got hit harder in a way. Like I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it's almost like some of the ones that got delayed again because they were just that far out of step, kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Well, let's just talk about the draft first of all, then, with everybody for this year. And I'm interested in how you guys went into the draft, and if you started with any kind of strategy or game plan in mind, and if you kind of put much research into your picks or not. Because just for myself, I just kind of wing it a lot of the time, which I don't research many games. There's some that I did, but most of the ones I just kind of went, "Oh, I think that'll do well." Click. But yeah, I'm interested to see if you guys were the same or if you did it differently or anything. So maybe let's start with Rick.
Yeah,
talk about how you started the year off.
Yeah, I mean, given where I've landed this year, I'm probably not an example to copy off, but I had a master list. Just a big old list, no order, all the games that I was looking forward to this next year. And I think in hindsight, I probably should have thought a little bit more about what other people were wanting rather than just myself. I think in a couple of those games where they've been dinged, it was probably foreseeable in a couple of ways. I did also, in some respects, try and think about likelihood of releasing. My big gamble, which didn't pay off, was Breath of the Wild 2. That was my first pick. I knew there was a reasonable chance it wouldn't come out this year, and as it happened, it hasn't. But the thinking was, if it comes out, that's 20 points guaranteed, if not more. My other picks, generally, I aimed for stuff that at least initially was supposed to be coming out this year. A couple of them didn't, similar to Paula with Stray. But my thinking was, what am I looking forward to? And I also think is not too niche to maybe hit reviewers who aren't necessarily going to click with it in the way that I would, is going to generate enough press for reviews. And the one that didn't, which was Fantasian, I genuinely thought more reviewers would pick that up because of the pedigree of the studio behind it. As it happened, we were able to manually score that, so it didn't matter too much. But yeah, I've gone very much around about houses. The short answer is big old list. See which one I want to pick the most when my turn comes around, but it's still available.
It's interesting what you said there about there's 2 things you said. One was the things you thought were going to do well, but then maybe you didn't think so much about how critics would take it, and then things that perhaps may not get enough reviews, which is actually quite an important thing that I think a lot of people forget with the Fantasy Critic League, is that some of those smaller games, which may be like works of art, the risk is that no one does any reviews for it because it is so niche, and you end up not getting a score, kind of thing.
Yeah, and to give you an example on that first point, I got dinged hard for Bright Memory Infinite. That's come with a -5 late in the year. The main criticism seems to be that it's quite short, which isn't personally a problem for me. And I think next year going into it, that's something where I have to think, well, is that the kind of thing where a reviewer might criticize that? Because the original version of that game was like 20, 25, 30 minutes long. Again, given the pedigree of the developer, which is one person using Epic's framework thing to build the game from the art assets, which is their actual skill set, it's understandable that it's a little bit shorter. And that's the kind of thing where looking at draft picks for next year, I'd probably think more about, well, how might that fly with reviewers versus does that matter to me? Because the former, clearly it does. The latter, I in some ways relish a shorter game, but that's a topic for another time.
Well, and similarly, I was convinced that Honey Pop 2 Double Date was going to be a real banger.
Well, it was a real banger.
Pun intended.
And
it only earned me 6 points in the end, so I was a little bit, disappointed with that. So yeah, Alex, what about you? How about because I think, were you new this year as well?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. So how did you enter into it as a new player?
I'm a total goddamn nerd. So I did plenty of research, and most of my research was actually on Open Critic, because my thing was like, I don't give a shit how games are, like what people think of the game. How does Open Critic rate the game? And like Open Critic is way different from other review aggregators. Their scores are just completely, I find, completely different than Metacritic. They tend to skew lower than others. Like I find 90s are harder to find even on Open Critic. So I was like looking at Open Critic, and I was just trying to go through like, what kind of games get scored what? Is there any consistency? How far back do these even go? Because it doesn't go that far back even. Also, I think they maybe have fixed it, but man, their search tool is terrible. But anyway. Because when you search for it, you have to like, the game has to pop up in a list. You can't just like type in a keyword and then click enter and like see a list. And like, anyway, whatever. I think they've done some edits though. They're a small team, so it's fine. But you know
what? I think we've been spoiled by the beautiful user experience of howlongtobeat.com.
There you go.
Yeah,
I'm spoiled run. But I went through and was really like, and also I got like fucking stuck in the second last draft pick position. So I was like, shit. Like I knew I was kind of picking from the refuse. To give you an example, only one of my games that I drafted scored. 2 of them have not released, and I had to drop the other 2. So 4 out of 5 of my draft games did not freaking happen because so like the draft is important, but it's not that important. Like at the end of the day, I could barely get any games that I thought would be good. I was just like, crap, which ones might score? And so I just kind of banked on a couple safe ones. Monster Rise being the only one that actually came out and did anything.
Well, I think like you said, with a couple of the ones that didn't release, you were able to drop them as well. So even if you do pick them early in the draft, sometimes they can be a good one to risk, because the way our rules are set up, you can drop games that have been drafted, but not games you pick up later.
Yeah, but then also the difficulty, and like that was something that I was looking forward to, but then also something that's hard is that you got to wait for them to say it's delayed. So god damn it, every day I'm like, Team Cherry, can you just please say that Silk Song is not coming out this year? just say it's not coming out this year. You know what I mean? Braid Anniversary Edition just dropped off the face of the planet. That was supposed to be out in spring. Said nothing about it. Same with Crossfire X. I had to manually drop that one as like my drop. But it's coming out now in 2023. But they just didn't say shit until like the very end, which I understand as a company. That makes perfect sense. But as a guy playing a game on the internet, I'm like, come on!
Just tell us it's not happening.
Yeah, so I basically I had a list of games that I thought were like from genres that just in general had a good track record, and was like, all right, let's just stick with, and I also looked up the developers and stuff. So I was like, okay, that was actually what I was more concerned about. I was like, is the developer reliable, and does this developer like strike out more than it fouls out, kind of thing. So I was like, all right, go for that. So anyway, that was kind of my strategy going into the draft.
And some developers as well love to talk about their game, but then they'll talk about it for years before it actually comes out. So you might think that, oh, it's coming because they keep telling us about it, but nah.
Yeah. I mean, Hollow Knight was like a Hail Mary, because I was like, I need to just have on that draft like one game where if it comes out, just like dollar bills, you know. Like, that's what I needed. And I also wasn't worried because I was like, if somebody counterpicked that one, it's like, well, which I don't think anyone will, because they're terrified if that one comes out, because they do really well. But if you do,
that's a lock, that game. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I feel like whoever
Mhm.
gets it is getting points, probably over 20. You know, like, it's just a good game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of where I went in my headspace, was just
Yeah.
learning.
No, that's interesting. That's very different to my own approach because who did very little research. So
Well, when you think about like Open
like-
Critic is what we're gaming, right? Like we're really
Totally.
like going against that site and how critics look at things, and critics have there is quite a pattern.
well, and I think it shows for anyone who's unaware that Alex has been in the top spot basically all year on the leaderboard. I don't think you've been off the top spot really since you got there. So it's been a very strong year for you either way. So
Yeah.
you know, whether it's down to the strategy or just luck, we'll wait and
Probably
see.
a bit
But
of both.
but I'd say with the hard work you put in it, that's probably a good part of it.
Yeah, I
Like,
think
I'm
it
surprised.
helps for sure. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
What about you, Paula? How did you come into this year?
Well, last year I wasn't like really. I guess I wasn't really keeping track of Fantasy Critic League as much as I was this year.
Mhm.
So this year I wanted to like probably try to pick my games and stuff like that. I started with in the first round with, okay, what's the one game I really want to play this year? Like day one, no questions asked, and that was Team Fantasy 5, because Team Fantasy 4 was totally awesome. So my initial approach on trying to pick the first couple of games was, okay, what do I really, really want to play because it looks awesome? So that's Team Fantasy 5 and Counterpick of Spirits. I kind of forget with Disgaea 6 because I didn't do my research. Because if I did, I would know that Disgaea was kind of like going in a bit of a downward spiral because of pretty much people being tired of the formula. And then I noticed Bustafellos was there, and I was like, hey, I can pick an Otome. Hell yeah. Like, if what I'm saying here, like, my thought process is zero. It's just gut feeling at this point, or like, oh, I might play that. So I was kind of sad though, because Family Detective Club wasn't like as well received, but then again, it was like more of a traditional visual novel rather than, I don't know, a Saturnian Danganronpa, so damn it. And then I just started like picking stuff like during the years, like, hey, that looks cool. Hey, that looks cool. Hey, that looks kind of, oh wait, it is a bugfest. Thank you, Aldo. So yeah, that was my year pretty much.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, and you know, reigning champion, how does that affect what you go in? Do you try and do the same thing again, or did you try and change it up a bit as well?
I'm trying to think because I don't remember what I did last year. I guess last year I saw Animal Crossing New Horizons, and for some reason it was like, hey, that looks like fun, and people like really seem to like Animal Crossing. And the thing is, when I didn't really vibe with New Leaf, and then there's New Horizons, and they're adding like all the crafting stuff and decorating outside. And when you get a person who was like meh about Animal Crossing, really excited about Animal Crossing, it was like, okay, this might actually be like a very good and polished game. So that was the main reason why I chose it. I wasn't aware of the upcoming pandemic at the time, so beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think that helped definitely.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I guess
alright.
Oh.
No, sorry, go on, please.
No, since last year there were fewer people, and also there were like a lot more games that I guess I knew more about that were coming out that year. I was more confident on my picks. Here I was just fumbling around.
Yeah.
So yep.
I think having more people this year as well has changed it a little bit to last year, just because the competition, I guess, is a little bit less diverse. Well, was less diverse last year than it is this year. So
And the
It's kind
draft's
of-
way more competitive with more people as well, because you know if you don't pick it now, there's less chance it comes around next time.
Yeah.
And at the
I
moment,
actually lost a couple of bets because someone like put all their money onto like the one game I was trying to pick up. So
Yeah.
it was fierce. It was a bloodbath.
well, yeah. On that, you guys have already pointed out the game that basically helped you the most, I guess, or that was your biggest scorers for this year. But I'm also interested in what game you drafted that perhaps surprised you the most, like for better or worse, like the game that you thought, like, or game or games that you thought, oh, this is gonna nail it. This is 100% score, but you ended up losing points or something.
12
or the
minutes.
one that you thought was, the one
I
that you
thought
thought
was going to be like a 90. Sorry, I know you're mid, but I just want to get the anger out. I'm so annoyed that they didn't stick the landing, and I know that
Which
both
one
of
was
you
that
have played it. 12 minutes.
Yes.
It's
Fuck
Annapurna.
that game.
It's proper talent. All the pre-release looked amazing. Xbox are putting their weight behind it, and then they went and, by the sounds of it, bodged the ending. And I'm planning to play it soon, so I'll find out. But sorry, go on. Yeah, and then a big name cast. And then by the sounds of it, they got them to do American accents. And it's like, why on earth would you hire James McAvoy and Daisy Ridley and get them to do American accents? Whose smart fucking idea was that?
To be fair, I got caught up in that too. Like, I thought that was going to be like in the 80s at least kind of deal. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was a genuine surprise. I gotta say, I don't think in hindsight, none of the ones that scored poorly for me are actually a surprise. I just let my emotions get in the way. Like, that's when I thought too much about what I would enjoy.
Actually.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So like, for instance, Mario Golf Super Rush, that's the one that tanked the most for me because it got a 71. Despite the fact that that game is apparently very fun, quite good. And like, but the issue and thing I always forget is that the fucking Mario sports games are shit at start at the very least, especially in recent years. They're just bad at start and then they get better. Like Mario Tennis, much better now than when it came out. Mario Golf, same thing. And that also, it's just like their quality has become middling at this point. And I was like, why didn't I knew that. I knew that. But
when that bid happened, I saw you bid it and I was like, shit, why didn't I think of that? So it's like, you're not alone.
Yeah, because the marketing was good for this one. It did look pretty fucking good, but yeah.
I mean, and to be fair,
I actually expected Mario Golf to tank because of how Mario Tennis came out.
Yeah, but it looks better than Mario Tennis.
See, I expect anything with Mario in the name just to score well. Like, but I'm not too familiar with Nintendo stuff anyway, because I don't.
And this is where my bias came in because I loved Mario Tennis Aces. I actually thought it was great. Like, I was like, this is a really fun game. Like, it's a fun Mario Tennis game.
Someone had to.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people I know love it too, is the thing, right? Like, most people I talk to enjoy it. But I think it just it can't break free from the fact that there's a lineage of Mario Tennis games, right? And so, like, you know, if it was just came out as this was the thing, and it would be even a different IP or something, it'd be like, oh, it's a fun game. But then it's like, no, it comes from the lineage of the Mario Tennis RPGs.
Yeah.
Probably speak to the review angle as well, though, because that game, if I remember correctly, as Tennis did, got dinged for content and lack of. And that's the kind of thing where if you're playing with friends or you just like playing casually, you know, as long as the core works, you know, that's great. You're happy with it. It's all hunky-dory. But from a review perspective, if there's no meat on them bones, you're going to ding it.
And it was totally fair. Actually, you know what one disappointed me the most is the Ascent, because I actually do think that reviewers were too hard on that game. Because I think that game is better than the reviews made out on it, because that game is excellent. And I'm like, it got a 73, and I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, this is much better than a 73. Small studio, like, it's gorgeous. It was super fun. I was like, this is an 80s game at least. But yeah, I don't know. That one I was a little like, what? Come on. Like, the fact that...
That had a buggy start as well. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because it wasn't buggy on the Series X for me, but I guess on others, yeah. Oh yeah.
And it was fine for me as well. But I remember reading that there was huge, especially with trying to join co-op games and that sort of thing. Like there's huge problems.
See, I was single player in it, so
same.
There's always something, right?
There's always something. The one game I wasn't like, I don't want to say disappointed, more like sad about. Because it didn't like quite reach the potential it had, was Balto the Guardian Owls. Mainly because if that game had more time in the open, it could have like ironed out like so many issues with the game. Like I was like really looking forward to it because it was like more of a, I guess, Zelda-like adventure with like a Studio Ghibli-like appearance, which I really dig. But no, it just had to be not only a buggy mess, but it seems the controls are clunky.
See, it's funny because when I saw you bid that, I was like, Paula just lost this game. Because like I remember looking at the time, I was researching Baldo, and I was like, because I wanted to bid at one point, and then I like did more digging in, and I was like, because like there was all of this like all of the like media coverage on it was kind of like everyone was like, oh, it's cute, you know, and like I saw a few people playing it, and they were like, what the fuck? Why can't I do this thing? And I was like, oh no, I'm not touching this game. But I wasn't sure because it could have gone.
You looked at that and you went, Baldo.
Baldo, yeah, Baldo.
Yeah, probably. The one thing I do different is like do a bit of research next year.
Yeah. But I will say I did not think it was going to get scored as poorly as it did. I thought you were dealing with like a 65 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, maybe a couple points down. But yeah, that game
57.
Yeah, even I didn't see that coming. I was like, "Oh, holy shit, that's way worse than I thought." I thought a couple points off, maybe.
Can we take a second as well to appreciate just how poorly Disgaea 6 scored?
Yeah, that was interesting to me. I thought that was a banger for sure. I thought that was going to be like a definite hit for you there, Paula, but I don't know.
Well, I've just scrolled down to Paula's page to see the Baldo score, and I've just seen it at 72, and it's like, hang on, what? Because you think Disgaea, you think 80 minimum. Like those games are universally good.
Yeah.
But Paula, didn't you say the fan base has been kind of turning on, or like said like the game?
I guess is when I read some of the reviews, it was like, oh, this is like more of the same. There isn't like really anything new. So I guess it is like, I don't want to insult the game and say it's like Pokemon fatigue, but I guess Fire Emblem fatigue, like before Awakening, because like all the games like were following the same formula or were a little bit samey.
Yeah, series fatigue.
Yeah. So I guess it is that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Oh. Well, and that's like I think everyone's touched on. It's like it's that difference between what you think should do well or what is popular even in its own little genre, but the critics might have something else to say.
Well, yeah, I did the same thing with Ghosts and Goblins. Ghosts and Goblins was my favorite game as a kid. I had it on my Game Boy, which I know it's like. And so the thing is, I'm a little inundated into the difficulty of Ghosts and Goblins. To me, it never feels that cheap, but I know that's because I have muscle memory. So I saw Ghosts and Goblins Resurrections, and I was like, this looks dope. I was like, I like the art style, and all looks cool. And I just got swept up. I was like, this will be a great game. And look, it got 5 points, so that wasn't horrible. But yeah, I got sucked in by my own hype, you know, which maybe is the biggest strategy.
Similarly for me, I thought Ninja Gaiden Master Collection would be like, people would eat that up, because I remember loving it when I was a kid and playing Ninja Gaiden, and you know that similar sort of thing, like that kind of challenge and difficulty and kind of getting used to how it works. But yeah, that got like 2 points.
Yeah.
I mean, remasters and re-releases and stuff are kind of a bit of a rough game these days anyways, because sometimes they come out worse than you think they're going to. And
yeah, Grand Theft Auto.
Jesus. Yep. I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Oh my god, the
didn't
Grand
see
Theft
that
Auto trilogy.
No. See, I thought that was a shoe-in as well as soon as I saw that announced.
Same, fucking 54.
like GTA?
And that's quite generous by the looks of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I know. I honestly, did not see that coming at all. Like I thought that was like a surefire easy bet, you know?
Absolutely.
Apparently not.
Yep. So yeah.
Ooh, should we talk my counterpick?
Yes. So let's look at some more specific stuff from each of your rosters. So Alex, speaking of games that held you back or propelled you forward, how important was your counterpick of Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood for getting you so far ahead? Like, do you think it might have been a bit of a linchpin into your early lead?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it's basically what's going to make me win this whole thing, honestly. Because, like, when you look at it, what is it, 99? I mean, I guess I still have quite a few points. Like, I'd have 85 without it, but...
Listen to that humble brag. My God.
Oh my
I'd
god.
still be up there without it. It's all right.
Look, I'm not trying to, like, I just say the facts. But really, Everdread would be the one who could get near me if I didn't have the Counterpick, right? Because, like, he would be 18 points away from that. But I think, actually, like, mathematically at this point, I don't think anyone can...
No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
I think it's
much a
over.
foregone conclusion. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it was like a linchpin for me because once it got me ahead, it was so hard to touch because like even when you look at it, I've only had 8 games released, but really it's 9, right? Because I've had that Counterpick and like it scored me 14 points, and like that was just a huge thing because so many like everyone else's Counterpicks either lost them points, one got some points. Mango got some points for Battlefield 2042, and then others are just like the will not release, right? Because there's that strategy of like, oh, okay, well, I'll just will not release it. But like the issue is that just means you just lose points, right? Like you just get nothing. And
Yeah, going for a will not release is definitely the safe bet because you just kind of zero summing it, and that's kind of what I went for as well because I counterpicked Sports Story, which I think would do well if it comes out, but I just didn't think it would come out this year, so I kind of just went for the safe play on that one.
And then the thing is, like, for the ones that people thought, like, wouldn't come out this year, like, I know, Rick, you got burned.
Mildly.
Matt got burned by Neo.
Yeah.
Yeah, mildly. You didn't get that, but Ashgazer got fucked by Halo Infinite. Like, that game just... yeah. Like, I mean... And then Grand Theft Auto. Oh, poor dude. Yeah, just got trashed by that. But like, you know what I mean? So like sometimes you're like, oh, I don't think it'll come out, and then it comes out and you're like, shit. You know, like because even if it doesn't do super well, it still hits, you know. And like I very specifically, and I recommend this, I looked up, like I made a list of games that I saw that I was like, that shit looks iffy. And a game that has 3 titles to me is always a fucking iffy game. Like it could have been called Werewolf, it could have been called The Apocalypse, or it could have been called Earthblood. Like all those are titles, but instead it's Werewolf, The Apocalypse, Earthblood. And I'm like, nice, this is a bad game. So I was like, let's look it up. And then what I did though is like I looked up who the publisher is, Cyanide, and like, I'm sorry, Cyanide. They're Je suis désolé. They're a French developer and they make shit games, man. Like they just make bad games. And so like I looked at their stuff and I'm like, oh, what was their last few games? Okay, they're the Blood Bowl guys, Tour de France 2020, Pro Cycling Manager, Space Hulk Tactics. I'm like, this is going to be bad. So like I just had that moment where I was like, you know, all their games are just rough, right? And they're published by Nacon or Nason or whatever it is, which their games they publish are also quite hit and miss. And so I just had a feeling, I'm like, you know, track record wise, their games are either okay, but they're like barely ever higher than 70. They're basically always in the 60s. And then I got even luckier because they ended up in the 50s. So like, I don't know. I just kind of figured it's worth it to put in. I think it's worth putting in the research to the Counterpick because that is like, that's a one and done, right? Like your draft is different. I drop draft games, but Counterpick is like, man, sink or swim.
Yeah. Well, and the flip side to that as well is like with you drafting that meant that it couldn't be dropped as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I forget who.
Which I'm sorry,
Well,
gamer.
sorry.
Yeah.
With you countering it, yeah, not.
It's what happened to me on Breath of the Wild. Someone counterpicked that, and then when that got announced as a 22 release, tough, you stuck with it. I do want to very briefly run a little bit of defense for Cyanide. They were involved in Of Orcs and Men, which I think is one of the greatest games that came out in that generation. It's a little bit rough, but it's an amazing game.
But key here, it's rough.
In your defense, that
It's
was
a little
2012.
rough, but-
That was 2012. It's the one good one I could find. And if you looked at any pre-release for Werewolf, The Apocalypse, Blood, whatever it was called.
But even when you look at Of Orcs and Men, the Metacritic aggregated scores for PC is 69, PS3 is 57, Xbox 360 64. So their games might be fun, but they're trash. Do you see what I mean? Like it's like the fun matter doesn't matter. I bet there's fun to be had in playing a shit werewolf game. You know what I mean? But like the problem is that critics are like, this is bad.
Oh man.
Well, and I think that's the big difference, isn't it? Like the site has Fantasy Critic League has the cutoff at 70 for like high is good, low is bad. So, but it doesn't mean that a game that scores in the 60s is one you're not going to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there's a cutoff that has to be met somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's 70.
Exactly, because this game has nothing to do with enjoyment. It's all just about like, are these technically sound video games? Which I'm learning even more, like with the Ascent and stuff. It's like, don't bet your money on the games that might be complicated and buggy. I'm learning that like anything that deals with online, just don't go fucking near it. Because like, unless it's Capcom, because I don't know, they work their magic. But like, you know what I mean? Like I'm like Ascent, damn it, shit, they had co-op. Fucked. You know, Battlefield. Ooh. Though I guess Halo is like the opposite. So I don't know.
Yeah, those on release kind of multiplayer bugs will tank the initial score quite hard, I think, and very few places go back and adjust their scores later. So
yeah, where Halo got away with it is that the campaign came out like 3 weeks after the online component, and the online component I think is still labeled as beta, so it was judged almost entirely on its campaign.
Well, actually, the score came out for the online multiplayer like first. They like everyone was scoring the online. Oh yeah, most places have been scoring them separately, but they've been aggregated as one. And I'll just say right off the bat, like the multiplayer and the campaign have both scored extremely high. So I don't know. That's a game where I think they took their time and it paid off.
God knows they had to.
Did the right thing with that game, where they're like, this is a big franchise, let's not ruin it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just like ease up. Anyway, so my advice to any new players, research that counterpick, yo. Research it real good.
Awesome. So on the other end of town is Rick.
Yeah.
Who, the interesting thing for me with your roster was that you had a couple of games that either didn't receive scores or had a hard time receiving scores. And I think After the Fall, which is your latest one, just today got a score update on the site. And it's been hit with a 69, which is a -1, unfortunately.
It is nice, though. Same wavelength, I love it.
And roundabouts. But then, also Fantasia, which we actually manually scored because it had a Metacritic score but didn't have an OpenCritic score. And so, we had a little discussion about it at the time and decided, that's fair enough, and you can have that score. And that ended up being your highest scoring game as well, I think.
So far, I mean, Wolfstride has got 8 at the moment. That may well, if I'm lucky, get a few more reviews and actually break double digits, which would be nice. But as it stands, that is my highest scoring game with 9. You're right.
But do you feel like it was worth looking for those niche games a bit more, like you discussed before?
I think for the bidding, absolutely. So it's a shame that like money you have at the end of the year doesn't count for anything, because CD Projekt Rick has got a really healthy balance sheet. I think I've still got like $88 of my $100 budget. And my strategy for the picks was finding things that I thought would do well, and that I didn't think I would be outbid on. So I think I bid 5 for Sifu. Everything else I bid $1 for. And then Sifu was the one that bloody isn't going to release this year anyway. But I think by looking for more niche stuff, I actually also ended up doing more research. That seems to have borne out in what they've scored, because I've scored about double the points from my bid picks as I have from my draft picks. And so having a clearer way is good for that. I think if a game that's a little bit more obscure does well, there's an element of surprise and novelty that reviewers sort of take into account subconsciously, and I think they get slightly higher scores in that way. And also, I think it gives a little bit more fun to it. Like, sure, if you pick Breath of the Wild, which I also did, and it releases and it scores gangbusters, like, everyone knew that. I think there's an element of extra satisfaction for sort of unearthing a rough diamond and that sort of coming good for you.
Well, it's fun as well. Like, I found it interesting seeing what people did pick up, and half of them I'd never heard of before. So it was a good way to kind of go, oh, what's that game that person chose and knows about that I have no idea?
And
so
on that,
if
anyone's listening, the Steam Game Fest is a great way to do that. So, for example, Alex took Chicory from that, so I've been partially responsible for his inevitable victory this year. That's what I'm taking credit for anyway. Narita Boy, which scored, and I will. Narita Boy, which scored 7. That's one that I found from the Steam Game Fest. Wolfstride I only picked because I'd played a demo for it and thought, oh, that's great. And again, it's another way of getting a really good idea of how stable is this release going to be. What does it feel like? Is this kind of thing I think reviewers would go for, like from a manual gameplay perspective, not just from how the pre-release marketing's looked?
And I think also like looking at every aspect, like I think sometimes as gamers we're happy with just one thing being cool. Like for me, I really enjoyed the Artful Escape, and that had minimal gameplay, quote unquote, but just the style and the music and everything was very cool, and it got well reviewed. But I think I did read a couple of reviews for it, and they did say, "Oh, it's got no gameplay, so that kind of sucks." Whereas, like, I went into it not expecting it to have any, and just more open-minded, I suppose, than I would be if I was critiquing it like a reviewer. So I had a great time. To me, that was like one of my highlights of the year, personally. But as a reviewer, I'd probably be thinking, well, yeah, but it's missing this, it's missing that. You know, it does very little with this one aspect, so that loses score for that, and, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so it's an interesting balance, I think, trying to think about it as a critic might think about it, as opposed to how much fun you might find in this little niche weird experience.
For sure. For sure.
But one thing I'm very interested about is, Paula, your pick from Buster Fellows, which you mentioned before. And that was an interesting one because it initially got kind of controversial for a second because it was banned in our league. When you picked it, it was, for anyone who is playing along, certain tags.
Still think it's controversial.
I don't think it was anyway. Certain tags in the league get banned. So if something is released internationally before in North America, which the league is based on, it's banned. So you can't like go, oh, I found this game that did really well overseas and it's due for release in North America, so I'm going to pick that one. Because, you know, that kind of gives it away. Whereas, like, Paula picked Buster Fellows, then it released in overseas and became banned in our league because the tag was banned and it got the tag applied. So then we manually allowed it because, obviously, why wouldn't you? And then it did really well and scored 19. So, you know, I'm just curious about how much you did know about that before. Or like
Okay,
if you
so-
did have a lot of research into that one.
This is where Paula goes on.
Oh, this is where the scoop
Thank you very
comes.
much.
Research? What is that? Is it tasty? Oh, to be honest, like, I just when I knew like Buster Fellows was gonna come out like here in the West, I was like really excited because first of all, like one of the big things that usually like bumps down the scores for Otome games over here in the West, well, besides it being an Otome game and having like not a lot of gameplay, let's be honest, is the overall localization. So Axis games, I really love that they are bringing more games to the West, but they have had like some questionable localizations. One of them, and that was for Café Enchanté, is actually a meme in the Otome community because they translated a particular term in Japanese. I think it was like Hako Oshi or something like that. And it pretty much like define a person that will like support like every character in the game, like merch wise, that they buy merch for every character in the game and doesn't have a favorite. And they translated literally as Box Butcher, which is not a thing.
Yeah.
And it became a thing because of the meme, pretty much.
love
So they had a moment of the translation was so bad in this point that it was good, or it was funny. So, but there are other points like with Color Mali's Unlimited, where there was like a little puzzle they had to patch because you couldn't get the answer from the puzzle because they work it. So of course some of the releases tend to get a bit of a lower score because of the localization overall. On the other hand, B-Cube seems to treat games really respectfully. And this particular game, I knew nothing about. Nada. Zero. The only thing I knew was that the protagonist was able to time travel in some way, shape, or form. I wasn't aware of how. So, and that's because I really like to go completely blind into visual novel games because, well, the story is like the whole thing. So, yeah, I knew nothing. I just kind of knew the characters. I kind of knew the music. They look cool. I knew nothing.
And that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it.
I am innocent.
Because God damn it, I researched it and I found reviews from 2020 in January, and I was like, this damn game has English reviews from a year ago. I was like, how dare you? But I'm like, whatever, it's fine. I'm like, you played it.
I put it to a vote, and everyone said, no, it's cool. So
yeah, I was like, I'm not raising a stink. It doesn't look good when the guy in the lead raises a stink, so I'm like, I'm just gonna shut up.
Where's the sportsmanship, Alex?
But I suppose this is, but see, and also I remember at the time too, though, that I had this sort of thing where it's like, okay, on one hand, yeah, sure, there are some reviews of this in 2020, but also on the other hand, nobody except Paula would even fucking know this game existed. So frankly, it's like, she might as well be allowed to get it, because like, it's not like one of us is gonna put a bet on Bustafellows, right? I'm like,
excuse you, I was waiting on
also,
Bacon Beth for Bustafellows' release.
Were you?
And also,
I certainly wasn't.
And let's be super honest here. Like, from I've been around the community on the. Well, oh my god, I don't know how to talk. I've been around in the Otome community like in a more active way, like in the last year. And what Japan likes is not always like the West likes. So at times a game may score a lot on Japan, but people will raise a stink on whatever topics the game cover here in the West. So
well, I think
it isn't a guarantee either way.
Yeah, like along with the localization stuff that you mentioned as well, like that, it is still a bit of a gamble anyway. Like,
Yep.
Yeah. So
I
don't
gamble.
mind
A good gamble.
Yeah.
Well, that's the deal, because had it gone terribly, we all wouldn't have even noticed. So, you know. Do you know what I mean? Like, really, it's because it did great.
Pretty much.
Now I learned, though, like, Paula's starting to teach me about Otome, so now I'm going to keep an eye out for Otome next year. I found some good websites.
Yeah, you might have some competition with the next one, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
It is mine. Mine.
So after, seeing as we're basically at the end of the year, and there's still a few more releases, and I reckon like people like Everdread are going to raise some more spots because he's had some late bloomers with Halo Infinite, and I think he's got the Gunk coming out soon. And
yeah, that game looks
right. Oh no. Yeah, I mean it might do. I think it's set to do all right, but maybe not amazing.
That looks like a 75 to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Watch
it
like
looks
an
like we're
89.
pretty much set for the year almost. Like there might be a little shift here and there, but that's about it. But we'll go in reverse of got written down. But
sure.
Let's talk about what kind of advice, because we do have some new players coming in next year who've shown some interest and will be hopefully joining the league. So if they're still listening and still interested, what kind of advice would you give to a new player? And we'll start with Paula. And yeah, if there's anything you could tell anyone or you'd want to hear yourself coming in as a new player, what would you tell them?
Think a little bit. I didn't bring a speech or anything, but I guess like one of the things you should always like keep in mind is like, okay, is this game you're trying to like bet on pretty much? Is this something you would be interested on playing? And then ask, okay, is this something that you think other people would like? Because I might be interested in playing something. It may look like the most entertaining game on the face of the earth to me. But as Rick said, we can be a bit of a niche community over here. But also, at the end of the day, I think if it is something I can't get like excited about, I'd rather not bet on it. Because if I myself wouldn't play the game, I don't know, like day one, or like wouldn't be interested on picking it up, I don't think that's a good game to bet on.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree
Well, and I
more.
think that having that personal kind of investment I find it makes it more fun because you want it to do well as well. Like, you're not just going purely on numbers.
Hmm.
Mhm.
No,
So yeah,
that's great. Yeah,
that's it.
sorry. Cool. Rick, what would you have done differently to keep yourself off the bottom?
A lot. To be fair, I'm fourth from bottom now.
I know.
Let's put a little bit of respect to my name. I've not done quite as badly as I was doing for a good stretch of it.
It's true.
I would echo quite a few of the things that we said over the hour. I think I would definitely give more thought to my counterpick. There was a method to the madness of picking No More Heroes 3, but obviously that didn't really work out at all in the end. I would definitely do more legwork in terms of my original 5 picks, because the ones that did release didn't really perform as I wanted them to. And I think there's a lot to be said for the reviewer mindset, looking for things that, if you take a cold view of it, you can see where things are going to be dinged. A lot of that, hype aside, surprises aside, you can often get an idea of where the wind's blowing. But equally, have fun with it. So, if you've got a couple of games that are coming that you're really, really excited for, and you can justify picking them, it's always more engaging when you've got something that you've got some personal investment in. I definitely felt that with Narita Boy, with that coming in, and I was really pleased when that one got a good score in spite of a few of its flaws, and the quality of that game shone through. And I think that's the fun of the league. The fun of the league is finding something that you believe in, and backing it, and it coming good for you. So, yeah, have fun with it, and try and have fun in a way that scores the maximum amount of points.
Yeah.
Maximize your fun.
Damn straight.
And Alex, I'm interested in because, like, as you've basically just coasted on through your year with good research and planning, obviously, behind it. But has that taught you much, or have you not really learned much at all?
Well, I think it's taught me a lot because, like I said, though, like I actively was involved for a lot. Like it didn't come. This wasn't by accident. I would say, obviously, there's luck involved, but like I was always checking. So whenever, here's a big thing. Actually, one of the big things I learned too is that not only is it do you think the game will score, it's do you think the game will come out, and like that. For me was a big thing where even some of the games that didn't score super well for me, I knew they were coming. And like, that's the thing where I'm like, when I make my bids, I was like, okay, a Nintendo Direct just came out. Well, Nintendo's fucking indie games, they're not telling you that it comes out next week because it's coming out next year. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, it's coming out, like it's coming. So like that was with Eastward, actually. I snapped that up late in the game because I was like, Eastward, that was the last game Nintendo showed on their Direct. It's going to be good. I was like, hit it. It looked nice. I know it's coming out. Let's grab it. So like I spent a lot of time, especially early on. I found that like, and I don't know if this is just a product of, how this year went in general, but like I scooped up a lot of games. I feel fairly early on, like the first 6 months of the year is actually where I felt like I was doing more with the Critic League. And then eventually, you know what I mean? Like there's ebbs and flows. So like at first I'm trying to pick up games, get good scores. But a lot of the big games that come out at the end of the year, we sort of know about usually pretty far in advance. But then it's also, they're a gamble anyway, right? Because games that are, coming out in November, like huge air quotes, right? Because you're like, oh yeah, coming out in November. Did you mean February of 2023? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, like I was playing very much like a week at a time, like, all right, what's going on now? Check the bids. And the fact that public bidding is going to be a thing. So if you're new, you'll be able to see potentially, I think we're still maybe discussing it, but like see the name in the game, but not the number. That's awesome. Cause like, being able to check out what people are bidding, I think is going to create a whole new thing to it. And like,
it's going to ruin my strategy.
yeah. And like, to be fair, and that's what's fun though, is like there's different strategies. Like I was having a lot of fun. Like I loved checking on Saturday, like what bids went through and like that kind of thing. Like I actually think if you get more involved, like when you do the research and stuff, I think it's actually more fun in some ways, at least for me, because then I have like an investment in the league and I'm like, oh, I want to see what happens. And so like, yeah, there is a chunk of like work you have to do right at the start, but I feel like it's kind of concentrated in those draft weeks when you're like learning about it. And then you're just kind of doing what you do, you know? I love games. I just keep up with what games are coming out anyway, right? And then it's like, oh, wow, that's coming out. Oh yeah, the Critic League, right? And then you just pop in. So I don't know, just get involved and have fun with it. And I think get involved like in the community stuff too, like being on the Discord was fun, chatting around, you know, we all shit talk and stuff, or like we're like, ooh, what's coming out, like that kind of thing. And it's just it's a good time, you know.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun discussing it on Discord and things when you know big scores get taken away from people or added or whatever.
Someone like nabs a bid out from another person and you're like, no.
And with bidding in mind, one thing I do want to throw out there as well, especially for new players, when those games are coming, think about when they were supposed to come out initially, what kind of impact lockdown delays might have had on those games, how likely you think it is that it's being put out just to get the damn thing out the door, and the way that might or might not impact scores. It's worth thinking about.
Grand Theft Auto.
Oh, Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, absolutely. Well, interestingly, for anyone who floats around the YouTube space, Matt McMuscles just did a video on what we know of the launch so far. By the sounds of it, that game was A, supposed to release like the best part of a year ago.
Yeah.
B, was also rushed out because the next gen versions of GTA 5 weren't ready. And C, there were a lot of warning signs internally that was going to be a cluster. And also, you know, 3 I, if you think about it, how little was shown ahead of release, how rushed that announcement to release was, which isn't really Rockstar's approach.
I was going to say Rockstar like give you a big lead in.
Yeah,
there were pieces to be put together if people looked past the hype, and I think that's something that Alex highlighted, especially earlier on. You know, understanding the hype, but then also where there's obvious signs if you stop and think about it, whether it's Mario, whether it's, you know, Werewolf, whatever it happens to be. And I think there's a lot of value throughout the year, whether it's, you know, the early picks or the bids, to try and take the nostalgia goggles off a little bit, and not the nostalgia, the hype goggles off a little bit if you can.
That actually is like another good point too, though. Like I found all the bids that I made that were the most successful were ones where I watched previews and actually like explored a bit of people playing like slightly longer versions of them. And I was like, oh, because like I remember Werewolf, I went and I saw like, because I saw a trailer, but then I was like, all right, what's like, let's see a gameplay preview. And I went, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And I was like, Counterpick. And then, but in other places I went and watched, you know, like even just Eastward watching the gameplay, I'm like, oh, that's great. I played a demo of Chicory. I'm like, oh, this is excellent. I actually know it is because I've done it. And I'm like, reviewers will probably dig this. But then I didn't really watch previews for Mario Golf. I just watched that trailer, which got me real hype. And I should have watched the fucking previews more. Because
hype is dangerous.
Hype is dangerous.
Oh, it is. It so is.
But it goes both ways as well, because some of the biggest picks I know last year that did well were the unannounced games. For me, one of my biggest ones was during the draft. I drafted "quote unquote" unannounced Assassin's Creed game, which ended up being Valhalla, and I was just like, you know, they're on a good track record with Assassin's Creed. I reckon they are going to release one this year. So for me, that was like, I reckon that'd be a good pick, but it's risky because it hasn't even been announced.
If it's not been announced, it can't be cancelled.
But there are some games that like aren't necessarily even talked about, but we kind of know it coming. You know, like we know there's another Call of Duty when there's another Call of Duty kind of thing. Or there's another Battlefield every few years. So
I think there was a Pokemon, and then like someone also drafted the unannounced Metroid 4 kind of thing, which that was a bold move, and it worked out great. Capital, I
Yeah.
think, did that. Yeah. I don't know. I'm too nervous for that shit, man. Like, I don't. I'm like, that's too risky for me. I'm like, I don't know.
But that's one thing I really enjoy about the league is that kind of risk taking. Like, because when it pays off, it feels so good. But
Yeah.
it doesn't always pay off.
Yeah, I know. And then you're like, shit. Well, see, I'm nervous
Yeah.
for next year because I don't know. I feel like I do think with the Fantasy Critic League, like, actually, I don't know. You know what'll probably happen though? It's like a newcomer will come in full of verve and energy and take it on. Because I don't know if I have the same level of energy that I had for Fantasy Critic League this year.
You don't need to worry about next year. Next year's my year.
Oh, right. It's like you're complete the podcast.
I've got to
trifecta.
round out the podcast host trilogy.
Yeah,
It's written in the stars.
Well, that means you heard it here
Mind
first.
Freak painted a huge what's the name of it? A huge target on his back.
The universe owes me. That's all I'm saying.
I feel
He's
like
going
all
to go
three
with
of
his
us-
gut, knowing that it'll work.
Yeah. But I hope we get a big league
No
this year
research needed.
because having a lot of people is fun and
Yeah.
makes it tough.
Hey, so we've all talked loads. Have you got any sort of thoughts you wanted to sort of feedback in on any of the things that we've gone around Abatage?
Not really. I think you guys have covered it pretty much. Like, I kind of have the same thoughts. Like, there is that importance of, I think, looking at how critics would take things as opposed to how you might want the game to be. But also, like you say, picking games that you're invested in kind of makes it more fun as well. Like picking a title that you don't really know anything about, but you kind of know will score well is good for your score, but maybe you're not as invested or engaged if you've got a roster full of games that you just don't know anyway. So there's that kind of balance to do, and it depends what you're after as well. Like, you know, I think I'm learning from you guys as well that a bit of research might help next year because I don't research much at all. I thought I was pretty smart when I picked Honey Pop 2 because it had gone pretty much under the radar, and as much as I enjoy those games, I thought it would do well as well. But yeah,
It's like sometimes they go under the radar for a reason.
yeah. I mean, it got 76, so that's nothing to sniff at. But
Points are points.
Yeah,
Points are points.
For a little Kickstarter game, I think it did well. But that was like the most research I did was when I heard that was coming out. I'm like, I've got to find out if it's actually coming out, if it's been delayed, or you know.
It's research, I swear.
Yeah. But the rest of them, I was like, that sounds good. And like, I'm kicking myself for some games like Origami 2. Like, if I actually thought about that, I shouldn't have picked it because it ended up losing 6 points. But I wasn't expecting it to do heaps good anyway. Like, whereas like Lost Judgment, I thought, yeah, that's going to do well, and it did. Because the previous one was well received, and you know, everyone loves a Yakuza game, or something to that effect.
Yakuza adjacent, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it
I
definitely
just bought that game the other day,
pays.
actually.
Oh, nice.
Very excited.
But it definitely pays to look at the developer and the publisher and like their track record as well, because like that's what I based my pick of Returnal on, was because it's a Housemarque game, and Housemarque have made like they got our console arcade games down pat kind of thing. Like they have a really good track
they
record
have
of-
a niche and they kill it for sure.
yeah, with like is it Stardust and
Stardust, Next Machina, Alienation, Matterfall. They all are basically, you know, inversions on a type.
yeah, it's definitely they follow a theme, but they do it really well.
Yeah.
100%.
So I didn't know much about Returnal, but I knew about Housemarque, so I was like, okay, that sounds good to me. So you know, all those sorts of things I think is good advice, and yeah, at the end of the day, have fun with it though. Like, you know, if you want to take a big risk and see how it pays off, go for it.
For sure.
That can be heaps of fun. But yeah, my final thought though about the league in general is just for everyone, when this goes out, sign-ups should be open, and so if you're a returning player, log onto the site and create a publisher for next year. Or if you're a new player, there'll be an invite link in the Discord and on the forum that you can follow, and you just need to log in with your own account and do the same thing, but you can join the league for next year that way. And yeah, and you know, we've got a really good community on HLTB and in the league in general. So really think it's a good place on the Discord or on the forum to like ask questions and discuss things if any of it does get confusing or you're not sure about things, because I think everyone's really helpful. You know, we're all happy to help each other have a good time. So, you know, I think it's definitely ask the community if there's anything that may be stopping you from taking part or something you're not sure about. But yeah, other than that, any final thoughts?
Oh, it's great.
Just speaking of
Take me
taking
down
part,
next
thank
year.
you for taking part in this. Yeah, and thank you for essentially taking a load off us for a week and letting us just sort of coast along. Normally we
Yeah.
have to organise all the questions and the
Nope.
thoughts, and it's nice to be on the other side of that for once.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, and so yeah, the other thing with the rules as well, just while I remember, there are some new rules for next year that we will be implementing and trying out. Again, there's a big post on the forum about that. That can be discussed right up until we hit go on the draft. So even though sign-ups will be open till the end of December, we've still got all that time where we can edit game settings and that. So if you do have an opinion on rules and even like games that you think should be banned or not allowed, that kind of thing, do let us know, because I'm listening to it all and we'll adjust things as necessary. It feels like we've got it kind of in a nice place where it is. But you know, always open for change, because just because I like it doesn't mean everyone else does. Please, yeah, give your feedback. And other than that, I hope to see some new players and some oldies back again.
Oh yeah,
And
I just
see
made
if,
my publisher now.
Awesome.
I'm
We'll
in.
see how the new champ might go in 2022.
Yeah.
I'll let you know this time next year.
Oh yeah, big talk. All right,
It's a lot. Replay this in 12 months. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I've got this clip saved.
Man, I'm going to be put on blast next year. Watch, I'll still have a Game Pass subscription, and I'll have come dead last.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be
Beautiful.
great. All right, well,
Thanks a lot, everybody. And thanks for listening. Hope it's been interesting. And
Dude.
yeah.
Peace.
Bye.